Welcome back to the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. Today, Holly, Erin, Copeland, and I are going to talk about Awaken, Heal, and Breathe, a program that Holly developed as part of her coaching work. The Awaken, Heal, Breathe process is to enter into a sacred space and weave together rich conversations, breakthrough meditation, transformational breathwork, and sound healing so you can heal and come home to the freedom, joy, and clarity of your awakened self. Holly Erin Copeland, human potential coach, sound healing practitioner, and meditation teacher, and myself, Stephen Altair, are going to discuss this power of awakening, healing, and breathing that Holly has developed as part of this podcast. So Holly, a special welcome, and it really is an incredible joy to bring you onto this Raising Our Vibration podcast. So tell me and our listeners a little, how did you first come to awaken this trinity of insights, awaken, heal, and breathe?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And I just feel so honored to be here. So thank you for having me on. I just want to say that. And I've just really enjoyed this podcast so much. So I feel very honored to have been given a spot to speak to everyone here that listens. So I came to Awaken, Heal, and Breathe through the three modalities that have changed my life for the better in immeasurably positive ways over the past 4 years. And I took them as it didn't all happen at once. There was actually sort of Awaken, Heal, and Breathe happened in that sequence for me. First, awakening through awareness practices and meditation that I learned from you and Kevin and in the Raising Our Vibration course, and the studying that we've done together. And then healing work is the foundational vibrational healing work that I started to do with Eileen McCusick and learning the method of biofield tuning and working with tuning forks and starting to see the world as the world of form that arises as energy, and that we're all energy and vibration, and how that understanding and then using the tools of tuning forks really as a way to tune myself first, and to come into resonance and coherence and vibration and to heal, using forks. And then through the work that I did with Julia Mick, who taught me a method of breath work called Breath of Love, and that I now teach. I'm in training, and will be certified in September. And really the power of the breath to heal the body and release energy, release stored trauma, and access source, consciousness or awareness in a very deeply embodied way. And yeah, each of those modalities, like as I started by saying, has so fundamentally transformed my life and been so positive. And I felt that there were many teachers and coaches out there who were offering one of them, but that I wanted to combine them together and make that my heart offering to the world. So that's what I've done. And you and I have a podcast now called Awaken, Heal, Breathe together, where we talk about some of those things, go in depth, and I'm very delighted to do that as well with you.
Oh, Holly, well, thank you, because I think the power of Awaken, Heal, Breathe is certainly, if you look at the foundations of what you described, is that those awareness practices, and then the tuning into energy and how that evokes healing, and then the power of the breath to release that trauma. So I'm just curious, perhaps if we could explore each one just in a little bit more depth, so that people watching or listening can actually feel right into, okay, how does this apply for me? How, if they were to come to you, for example, how would you work with that? And if they were to understand a little better about how they could use those practices to release trauma and to tune themselves and to wake up. So if we go
Yeah.
to the awake awareness practices first, what would you say is the foundation here? How should somebody says, well, what does that mean for me, and
Yeah.
how do I actually start? What would you suggest? How do you work with people who first come to you?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'd love to go in depth more. So when people first come to me, um, hold on. When people first come to me, um, I I like to begin by asking that fundamental question of self-inquiry, like, who are you? And to really see, to work with them to explore their own knowing of who they are and their perspective on the world. And, this question from the Tibetan traditions of, establishing your view or understanding what your view is. And through the work that I started, with you and with Kevin, and then other teachers that I've just adored, like Muji and Locke Kelly and Rupert Spira, who've all added their own flavor of understanding to that, and Mingyur Rinpoche, the understanding of recognizing, I guess, that for so long my view was this view of ordinary, from this perspective of ordinary mind. um I call it ordinary mind, although I think that can be confusing in Tibetan, because I think that can be awareness. But for me, that's just the everyday way that most, and certainly I had, viewed the world up until these practices of, really, it's the view of separateness. Really, if you want to break it down, it's, I am a separate self in this body, and my I-ness sort of ends here, somewhere here in the body. And I love how Charles Eisenstein is talking about these days. It's really resonating with me. This, he calls the story of separation, right? And that it's, if that's the case, if I'm a separate I in this body, then it's my job. I have to kind of get enough resources to survive. And so it becomes a little bit of a me versus them perspective on the world. And I have to get things. I have to get enough food and get enough shelter and all of that. And it's a very solitary and lonely way of being in the world. It feels very separate, and not, doesn't feel like this sense of feeling supported by the universe. And in that ordinary mind, I also found that my view of the world, not only had I, for most of my life, had a very separate view like that, but I'd also had a mind that would constantly put everything into bins. My mind, which is very analytical, loves to label. So I started to notice that my mind habitually would label things, and would habitually sort of put things into bins of good and bad. And I wasn't even really aware that I was doing this all the time, but it was like, it's a us versus them kind of way of being in the world. It's because we're separate. So then we start to see there's the good ones out there. Maybe that's, for you, that's Republicans, or maybe for you, that's Democrats, and there's the bad ones out there. There's the people who don't recycle, and there's the people who aren't conscious, and they don't try to do good things. And it's a constant way of kind of putting the world into this duality of good and evil. And I recognized that actually that had been something that in my own mind I'd really struggled with, because I actually had an intuitive sense since I was very young that all of us are fundamentally the same. That actually at our heart, even people who so-called doing the wrong things, from a political point of view or whatever, that I knew underneath they were good people. That kind of, and actually the Shambhala Buddhist path really resonated with me at first, that basically good idea that Chogyam Trungpa put forth. And his books, when I read them, really resonated with me, because I feel that way about people, and I always have, that there's this basic goodness that we all have. And so I was trying to reconcile the basic goodness that we all have with the evil that I saw in the world, and for me, the one that really hit home was all the harm to the environment, all the cutting down of forests, all the, inhumane treatment of animals and all of that, which I found so just wrecked my heart, um, and and ultimately stepping out of that story of separation and coming into awareness. So for me, when I was able to drop that sense of separateness through the awareness practices and shift my view to see that actually all there is knowing, and there isn't a place where I end and you begin, right? Like, can you find one? Anybody listening, like, can you find a place where I end and you begin? Because if you really look into it, you can't. Because there isn't one, because the story of separation is just a story, and it's actually not true.
Love it. Love it.
It's just not a true story. And that interbeing, that recognition of the truth of all of us as not separate. The core, the thing that really like hit home for me was this deep knowing and understanding, not in the conceptual mind, but actually through the practices, a heart knowing that actually everything's okay, and that all is well, and it will be well. And I needed that place. I needed to find the ground, as it were, of well-being, where everything was actually fundamentally okay. And that finding the ground changed everything for me, because I stopped having to scramble to get to, for, in the words of Charles Eisenstein, that story of separation. I stopped needing to grasp, because I knew everything was okay.
Beautiful. That's so beautifully said. Yeah, that knowing that you've referred to, how does someone know? So someone out there who's really caught in separation, what would you suggest? How do they begin to know?
How do you begin to know? You begin to know right where you are, right? You can't find it out there somewhere. So you have to actually just come home and know. And, you can do this right now just by closing your eyes and just noticing that before you do anything, awareness is here. That's not something you have to make happen. So that's first, is this recognition that, right, awareness is, we turn around away from I like how Rupert describes this, Rupert Spira, away from the multiplicity and diversity of things in the object-oriented world that keeps us separate. And we turn back to the knower, and we look at the knower, and we notice the qualities of the knower, and notice that the knower doesn't have any boundaries, doesn't have any edges. The knower doesn't come and go in time. And the knower is fundamentally equanimous. The knower, it's just knowing. So whether there's something that is apparently bad or apparently good, you can actually truth tell into, it's the knower comes before the goodness or the badness. That's a label. That's a story that was put on top of just the knowing. So just coming back to the knowing, and just starting to see that in this moment I'm knowing, and in this moment I'm knowing, and that's actually all that's really happening, is just knowing. That's where you start.
I really feel that. Thank you for doing that, because that's a really very simple example of resting as knowing. And so I'm curious now, because of this wonderful trinity that you've created, the Awaken, Heal, and Breathe. So speaking of knowing and resting back as knowing that has no edges and boundaries, you're also healing with sound and vibration that has no edges or boundaries, that everything vibrates or everything jiggles, to take some of those famous phrases. So can you speak a little bit about that, about how you then would integrate, for somebody who's listening, how does this become part of either what you unfold or the processes of healing and vibration and tuning forks particularly?
Yeah. So even though our knower, the essence of our being is that it's not actually anything and it's not nothing either, right? It's just awareness. And we are inhabiting physical, there are a physicality that's arising in this form world. And the physicality has vibration. And that vibration creates our experience, right? And the embodied experience of being human has this thing going on where what we physically experience as pain, to me, is just stuck energy. It's energy that's not moving in the system, and it can get locked in different places in our field, in our bodies, or in the biofield. So as Eileen describes it, we have a biofield or an auric field that extends about 6 feet out. And it contains a record of every experience that we've ever had vibrationally in the field. And our experience of being human arises from that energetic vibration. And so the tuning forks are amazing tools because they can interact with that field and release, or shift energetic patterns that we experience as a human being as pain or suffering or sadness or anger or hurt. It's not that we don't, I think it, that kind of everything's an illusion sort of Buddhist, I can go there and I can get kind of esoteric and philosophical about that, and in the right space can kind of feel that illusory nature of reality. But the truth is that for most of us, we're experiencing a very physical experience in form. And we would like that experience that we're experiencing in physical form to have less, to have more joy, more freedom and movement and creativity, and humor and laughter. And
I love that.
I
love the fact that you've described pain as being stuck and not moving, and that the sound actually helps to integrate or release or move it, right? Potentially when somebody. So could you perhaps just share a little bit, if somebody does have a stuck trauma somewhere in the field, how do you, as a healer, how do you work with that? So when you pick up the trauma, what would you, how would you assist even somebody who's listening? I know it's, if they don't have tuning forks, perhaps they might not necessarily do a self-healing, but you can attune yourself, right? And
you can.
So you can. Yes, in practical terms to help people.
Well, I mean, what I suggest is to, experience a biofield tuning session, exactly. Not to necessarily self-promote, but there's lots of great tuners out there. There are many, many hundreds or thousands even now that offer biofield tuning, and like the work I do anywhere in the world. It's, like energetic work, you can do it remotely. And I think you asked, what's the experience like? And, what happens is, the client lay there and we activate the field, and then I introduce the fork into the field. And in the biofield tuning map, the edge of your field is when you were born, and the area closest to you is your current age. And we literally work like tree rings through the field. And I feel for places where the energy is not moving, where there's resistance or stickiness in the field. And I just hold I hold the fork there and I feel into what's happening. And the fork has a conversation with the body. When the body doesn't want to hold pain, I mean, for those watching, I always show, a fist to me is like stuck energy and it wants to open. Its natural state is for energy to be moving. And the fork comes into the field and it hits the resisted energy. And then it basically starts to shift that energy so it can open and be free and free the person. And sometimes they re-experience some of that sadness or anger or whatever kind of is whatever's stuck or congested there in the field. But I basically am a facilitator, as the healer. I'm literally just allowing the fork to have a conversation with the body, to release that stored energy. And we work together. It's a conversation between me as the practitioner and the person experiencing it. And it's amazing. I mean, readily, very quickly, we can shift people's energy and they feel lighter and freer, and old patterns can literally shift in a 1 hour session.
Oh, I love that, Holly. And yeah, and I've experienced Holly's beautiful sound healing too, and it's exquisite. So I know Holly does a Dakini-like or goddess-like energetic job of working with sound. So I can thoroughly recommend those beautiful sound healing practices that Holly's does so adeptly. So it also beautifully in this melody that we're singing, it speaks also to the breath of love, because the breath of love is also the power of the breath to release stored trauma. So can you also now share, this is the third part of the Trinity, how this also naturally flows from, say, sound healing into releasing through breath awareness?
Yeah, sure. Would love to. I had done a number of different breathwork practices like Wim Hof and some others before I came to the breath of love. And the breath of love is, I think, brilliant in its gentleness. I am not one who really loves holding my breath, for example, for long periods of time. I just find it really uncomfortable. And what this methodology does is really facilitate people into a deep theta state. So it's like a meditation, but you are using the breath to open up the body and heal. Again, like trauma is places in the body where we're stuck or stored tension. And so we through this, we really use the breath to relax the body, to allow whatever wants to move, and then to release through the breath. So it's that kind of beautiful trinity of relax, allow, and breathe is what Julia teaches. And it has elements of holotropic breathing, for example. So there is an activation breath where you really get the pranic energy moving in the body. And you do that for some time, and then you surrender. And this is this kind of deep shift where you go from a relaxation into an activation, which then you do that enough and you move into a deep surrender. And we use guided imagery and meditation and music to then drop the person into a deep surrender. And people have profound openings in this technique. I mean, some of the women I've studied with have had like fibromyalgia disappear. They've had like issues with, joints and like arthritis disappear. Some pretty serious issues basically be healed through this breathwork technique, so, and makes people feel good when people do this technique, because I lead workshops where I guide people in this technique, and I do one-on-one as well, but in the workshops especially, I mean, people are deeply moved, and I call them breathwork ceremonies, because they have the element of, I do plant medicine. I talk very freely and openly about my plant medicine journeys as well. But they have the element of ceremony that I actually love about plant medicine work, of bringing people together and coming into a sacred space, of sharing intention, then doing a breathwork practice together and releasing, and then integrating. And I feel like we in modern Western society certainly do not have enough ceremony in our lives. You know, people who go to church have an element of ceremony, but many of us, that doesn't quite speak to us in the right, can quite found a way that those religious ceremonies work well. And for me, this is a resurrection. I'm going to use that word intentionally. This is a resurrection of ceremony into our modern lives. And it really changes people's lives, these ceremonies.
Oh, Holly, that's wonderful. I love the fact that we've gone from, awakening through healing and into breathing and arriving at surrender and ceremony, that you're essentially working with ceremonial surrender, right in essence, right throughout. There's right at the heart of this, there's you surrender to knowing, and you surrender to healing.
Yeah. You come right back full circle,
yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely. Holly, it's magical. So just tell everyone who's listening, how can they reach out to you? How can people find you? How can they come to you?
Oh, thank you. So Heart Mind Alchemy is my website, and you can go there and read more about these techniques and what I offer. And you can schedule a free 30-minute session if you just want to talk to me and see if the program is right for you. Yeah. And I also do individual biofield tuning sessions if you just want an individual session. You don't want to sign up for a whole package. So anyway, yeah, heartmindalchemy.com.
Oh, thank you. So heartmindalchemy.com, that is where you can find the wonderful Erin Copeland and Awaken, Heal, and Breathe. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Love and blessings in your day. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for engaging with us here. So Holly and I are really delighted that you joined us today. So if you'd like to learn more about practices of meditation, awareness, subtle energy, and meditation generally, including the Raising Our Vibration meditation app and the Raising Our Vibration community of practice, then we'd love to have you visit us here at raisingourvibration.net. So until next time, enjoy your practice, and Holly, an incredible honor and a great blessing to do this with you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Bye for now.
Bye.